This time around, I've got kind of a unique piece to work on. This is a Bachmann original Texas Chugger 210-4. Found this recently at a train show for a pretty good deal. It's currently in non-running condition, but honestly it doesn't seem to be in bad shape at all. Just have a few things to fix up here and there, tune up the drive. Let's see what I can do with it. So just from the quick examination, I already know that it has some split axles, which is pretty typical of Bachmanns of this time. There are a few of the nickel wires from the cow catcher missing, but those are easily replaceable. I have the bell, it's just broken. I'll put it back together later. But the rest of it seems to be complete and really in pretty good shape. So the first thing I'll need to do here is remove the shell. And there's the screw down there holding it in place. Looks like the original owner of this tried to add some weight at some point. Some of it's fallen off. I'll probably remove the rest of it. There goes that screw. And I think the rest of this just, let's see, does it lift off? Oh, there goes some of the weight. Ah, here we go. Looks like there are just some latches. Yeah, there we go. And there it is. And oh, they actually added quite a bit of weight. That chassis alone is actually not too heavy. We'll see how it works without the weight, and if it's not too good, I'll add it back in. So this is the typical Bachmann chassis from before the Plus era. Peel that off of there too. Yeah. So you've got a pancake motor here, just one of those little 3-pole ones. It's bigger than what you'll find in the most of the pancake drive diesels, except for the DD40. And looks like quite a bit of gear reduction there. I've actually worked on this kind of drive before, and if you tune them up right, they can actually run pretty smooth. So let's get this bottom plate off of here. 2 more screws. Lift that off. And there are the axles. I do see one small hairline crack on this one. So as long as I can get some quartering done, figured out, I should be able to put some super glue or epoxy inside of these plastic tubes and get the quartering to hold the way that it needs. Traction tire is almost completely dried out. I might have a replacement for that. Now, anyway, let's see, I can't remember if these are actual screws or if that's just a push-in pin. As it turns out, there's a snap ring on each of these, which holds the eccentric and main rod in place. These are kind of frustrating to get off. Kind of have to work around it with a screwdriver until it gets to a point where you can go in and pry it out. Eventually though, it does come out. Kind of have to unbend it, which means it's going to be kind of interesting to get that back in. I'll probably have to use pliers or something to squeeze that. Okay, I got that ring off, so now eccentric pulls up around the hex screw like that. Same for the main rod. And now the wheels lift out. And as for the rest of the side rods, they are just held in by these pins that are pressed into the wheels. So these pins are pressed in pretty hard, but once you get a good grip on them with pliers, use a bit of twisting motion while holding tightly onto the wheel, they do come out. The only wheels to use actual screws are the 2 in back, which have the gear. Just use a flat blade screwdriver to undo those. As it turns out, on this one, there was only one of those wheels had a screw and the other one's a pin. Got the wheels all separated now. So next I'll take the rest of the chassis apart. So this is one of those split frame designs. It's got a few screws on each side holding it in place. Right, there goes that. And the chassis just comes apart like that. Looks like there was a piece of tape holding this light bulb in, but of course that's dried up. I think that helps the light bulb to maintain contact with the chassis. Smoke unit. I may or may not keep that. When they're not in use, all they do is drain extra current. Then the gears. There's the big one, then a smaller one. And the motor right there. It's held in by 2 more screws. And then the cylinders are glued in place. There's no reason to remove those, so I'll just leave them on there. So to start, I'll be tuning up the motor. I'll just wipe some old grease off there before I do anything with it. Now I'll remove the brushes, which are just held on by these caps here, each with a screw. Don't want to lose the springs. That brush isn't falling out, so I'll get it later. Okay, and then 2 more screws on top. They like to use their red glue on these. I think it's a thread locker, but it doesn't really do much. Ooh, magnet came out with it. So that armature, or commutator, is kind of messy. Looks like a lot of oil got in there. Just collected brush dust. So I'll wipe that away. It's already looking a lot better. And I think I'll pull out the lathe and give that a little buffing. There, that's nice and shiny. Not much at all to cleaning that one, so put things back together. Front plate there. These screws are meant for metal, but they're going into plastic. It's really easy to strip those holes out if you're not careful. And it shouldn't affect the functionality of the motor as long as everything's staying together. And now just add a drop of oil to each of these bearings. And power the thing up. I believe this one is positive and negative. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter right now. This one doesn't seem to be especially well balanced. I feel a lot of vibration in there. But beyond that, it seems to be running nice and strong. And now that the motor's done, just get the chassis put back together. Wipe away some of that old grease first, of course. Use a Q-tip for these hard to reach places. And now drop the motor back in. Once again, you have to be careful not to strip the screws out. Although for these they're using the correct plastic screws, but it seems like they over-tightened them a bit at the factory. Which I've seen happen plenty of times with these. Get them too tight and then they strip out. Sometimes it even breaks the little post, like on the E60 electric I did a while back. That gear there. Drop of oil in there, because you can't get to that one once the large gear is in place. And put the large gear into place. At least trying to do it. There we go. That's all turning real free, just the way it should. Okay, now the smoke unit. Actually, I'll take this light bulb out for now, just so it's not getting in the way. All right, so the smoke unit goes right here. Chassis fits together just like this. And put the 3 screws back in to hold it all together. And then just to test and see how things are turning, drop the axle back on there. Actually, that's moving really stiff inside of that slot. I'll clean some oil out. Maybe that'll help. Oh yeah, there's some nasty gunk in there. That's moving a lot better. Still not perfect, but these parts are cheaply made. See where I can connect this. Oh, there's a spot. There's a spot. Well, this part seems to be running smoothly enough. Now I'll see if I can get those drive wheels quartered and working well together. So I did find that all of the axles were split, at least to a degree. I just couldn't see it before because of grease. So I'm going to have to epoxy all these together. And since I can't fit this stuff into a quartering tool, I'm just going to have to eyeball it and be quick about it. So get a little epoxy onto the tip of the axle there. Make sure it doesn't run onto the moving parts. Twist that in. And I'll just keep repeating this for all of them. Well, I've got all the wheels together. The epoxy's not fully set yet, but I can at least put them back into the chassis. They should all be quartered. I tried to do it by finding a point of reference while holding them into the chassis and then just carefully observing both sides. So I think this will work. Just add a drop of fresh oil to each of these. So I'll put the plate back on there for now. Actually, before I do that, I should add a bit of grease to these gears. Since there are multiple stages of reduction, I'll put a bit into the axle gear. See a little more onto this gear in the back. And then a little more onto the large gear there. Since he's turned at high speed, you want to use it sparingly. Got a little on the wheel. Oops. Yeah, that's running through nice. I also put a new tire onto the wheel. The old one just kind of chipped off. All right, next we'll be getting those rods reconnected once the epoxy is set. While those wheels are setting up, let's see if I can get into the tender here. This one seems to have a sound unit equipped. I haven't tested it out. For some reason, on this model, Bachmann used the New York Central Niagara tender, even though the correct tender for the Santa Fe 210-4 was the same one that was used on their Santa Fe 484, which they were also making. So, I mean, aside from fitting the speaker in there, I don't know why they chose to use this one. Well, actually, that speaker may have been the only reason. Okay, so the front comes off just like that. Is that a sock holding this in place? Very interesting. Looks like a good sized speaker in there at least. Ah, there it goes. Just had to find the right spot to release it. Wow, okay. This really looks like they just cut up some old socks and used them as padding. Very interesting. So that is the sound system. In fact, I wonder if those socks were even original to this, because if it's positioned like that, then the speaker wouldn't be facing down to the speaker grill. I'm going to have to look more into this. Well, in spite of all the leaking capacitors, this thing actually still works. Get up to about 6 volts. And it suddenly starts making chuffing sounds. There's 12 volts. Thing's pretty loud. Sounds pretty harsh too. Yeah, not exactly a great quality sound unit there. Nothing like we've got now. Well, still innovative for its time though. That's a lot of, they've got that whole circuit there with the integrated circuit, capacitors, just all sorts of stuff. Oh, is that a potentiometer? I wonder if that can adjust the sound level. Let's power this up again. Let's grab a flat blade screwdriver here so I can turn that thing. Come on. Okay. So you can use that potentiometer to adjust the chuff rate. There's the maximum. And there's the minimum. That thing hurts my ears. I don't think I'll be using it much. Well, the epoxy seems to be pretty well set now, so let's see if this works. And there's a bind there. So it looks like my quartering was slightly off, but I should be able to do a bit of fine tuning here without breaking things too much. Okay, so it looks like the problem may have just been a loose pin that was hitting one of the crossheads. So let's try that again. Hey, it's actually working. And apparently there's some oil left in the smoke unit. Oh, how long has that been there? Well, since it's working that well, I'll connect the rest of the rods and then put this on the track. Okay, I've got it on a piece of track. Let's see how that does. That's actually working really smoothly. I'm honestly impressed. Well, with that out of the way then, I guess I'll just finish cleaning this thing up and then put it back together. All right, so to clean things up, I've just got a little trickle of warm water, some soap on a toothbrush, and I'll start with the tender since it seems to be the dirtiest part. So I'll just soak that under the water a bit and start brushing. Well, that cleaned up really well. The tinder looks almost new. Just a couple little wear marks here and there. Very good overall. Shell, also very good. I repaired the front bell. It looks like the front of this may have gotten a bit of overspray from someone's painting project. It's not noticeable at most angles though, so I'll probably leave it alone until sometime later if I ever decide to paint that up. And I'll also replace the missing wires there later. For now though, I'm gonna go ahead and put this back together. Almost forgot to put the headlight on. Got that in place, it's working fine. So now, just put the shell back on. Front and middle kind of snaps into place. It's a pretty tight fit. There it goes. And just that one last screw in back to hold it together. When the screw gets frustrating, add really, really big magnets. There, now it's going in. All right, there's the engine reassembled. There's a socket in the back there. Kind of hard to see on the camera with the lighting, but this huge thing just plugs straight into there. When you push in far enough, it makes contact with the split frame. Just put that through there. And it's ready to run. Okay, I'll test it without a load first to make sure it's working the way it's supposed to. There it goes. Oops, it jumps the track. Okay, so it looks like I just didn't have all the wheels on the track. That's kind of easy to do because the construction of this thing is, as you can see, is pretty sloppy. Wobble slides around very easily. Let's get that going again. Still not doing great. Maybe I'll have to put that weight back in. Well, after doing a bit more fine tuning to the thing, I've managed to stop it from derailing. I put some little pieces of brass onto that bottom plate where the axles rest to get rid of some of the slop. And then I also found that the rear truck was sprung too heavily, so I cut the spring down, and that helped to put more traction onto the wheels. Not exactly a great runner. I think some improvements to electrical pickup will help quite a bit. What did it... Well, what happened? Well, it's been a while now since I've worked on this one, and after looking at things again and testing them out, I think a lot of the trouble may have had to do with electrical pickup, so I really cleaned the slots out here. I used a wire wheel and sandpaper just to get rid of any possible oxidation or anything else that could be blocking good conductivity, and also cleaned up all the axles so I can give them some fresh oil. So I'll get this back together now. We'll see if that makes any difference. Hopefully it does. So doing all that cleaning, it did actually help. It runs a bit better now, but the electrical pickup still isn't that good. I see a lot of flickering from the light, even though there's technically 9-wheel electrical pickup here. And I think a big part of that is just because of the frame itself. It doesn't really rest completely flat on all these axles. Like, it's only really resting on the front and back ones, and the others kind of float a little bit in there. I think just to help with extra traction over uneven tracks, so it can kind of do that. So I can't add wipers either because they have to be able to move back and forth like this. And I can't put them on the backs of the wheels because of all these little holes along the way, so that would just cause a lot of binding and snapping. So what I think I'm gonna do, well, I really don't like how the sound in this Tinder works anyway, so I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to replace all these plastic wheels with metal ones, put wipers on those, and then use this to get the power to the engine, and that will make it a lot more reliable. Tinder's electrified. I had a whole bunch of extra Kato wheels from some extra power trucks and such, so I took a bunch of those and put them in there. They're 40 inches instead of 42, but it's still close enough that most of the time won't even see it. Then I made a bunch of wipers to touch the backs of those. They seem to be doing just fine in there. They have decent tension without stopping them from turning. And the phosphor bronze strip is this 1mm width stuff from Albion Alloys. And this has worked really nicely for some other projects, so pretty good stuff there. And as for the part that plugs into the engine, I marked the positive side with a marker so that I can get that plugged in correctly every time. So let's get that hooked up and on the track and see if that improves things. All right, let's see what happens. I still have a little work to do to make it run a little smoother. But there's no more electrical loss along the way, so that is definitely a huge improvement to the performance. Oops. That came off the track and shorted out, so I still have work to do on the drive wheels, but at least the electrical pickup is no longer a problem. In fact, this is probably the best this one's ever run. And that time it didn't go off the track. Yeah, this is so much better. It even has sort of low speed control. So if I can get things worked out a little better with the drive wheels, maybe work on the gauging a little, improve the quartering, this might actually be a sort of almost smooth runner. Not bad. So I think I'll do a little more work here and there along the way, but as for this video, I think I've done all I want to do. And yeah, this has turned out all right, and I'm pretty happy with the results.